Hey everyone, it's Joe Glines here in Dallas, Texas.
Yeah, and Jackie here from Copenhagen, Denmark.
I'm just loving. I'm looking at our new layout. I love this layout. I feel like I could almost reach over, and like grab you now or something. It's funny.
Yeah, yeah.
It's the opposite. Yeah, it's no.
Okay,
I'm still
yeah.
going the wrong way. Yeah, yeah. Anyway, and we were just chatting, and a while ago, Jackie had told me this story where he's, of course, he's mentioned it several times that they at his company, not where he's doing stuff where he automates things, but they hired, like they're using a major automation tool, and he's because of his background and his knowledge, he's getting brought into some meetings. I don't think necessarily for doing the coding, right? But you're just to help make sure kind of things flow and make sense, and probably even explain to some of the management and whatever things they got to consider, or make sure their ducks in a row. But yeah, you were mentioning you were at a meeting, flushing something out, right? And what happened?
Yeah, you said it pretty well, right? I'm the I'm not the local IT guy, but still, as soon as a question about something with computers or code or whatever shows up, I'm consulted. Like, do you know anything about that? And the chance of me knowing something about it is at least likely in most cases, and that's why I'm often dragged into these um, automation things, because we have people fully dedicated for that, and there's a process of you getting the idea, contacting the right people, and then they'll put you in touch with someone who will analyze the task and ask you some critical questions. How often do you do it? Well, how long does it take? Blah blah blah, stuff like that. And if they then deem it automatable, then it will be passed on to a team that will then document the process and interview people in the process and so on, and then it will be passed on to an external company that will then actually do the automation, and then you will get that well documented back, so that we just simply have robots running that does that. But in the first part of it, before they actually reach out, they often ask me if I think it's automatable. And that also means that I'm often the one showing the process
Mm.
to the guy from uh, the vetting team or whatever you would call those. And the thing we talked about last was when I was sitting on this and screen sharing with the guy, and he was apparently recording it, which is fine. Um, as soon as we got into actual showing what we were doing, and because we as humans just log into a remote desktop, have a program running there that will show us all the values that we need to know, uh, we can easily read them and know if they're within whatever boundaries are set. And we can type them down if that's needed and send them to someone who needs to act on it if that's the thing. But because it's remote login through some Citrix windows and stuff like that, it actually means that I can see it, but I can't easily interact with it. And as soon as he found out that I, with my allowed access, couldn't double click the text and copy it, it's like, okay, so you can't copy the text, then we can't get it. Goodbye. Like that was how it felt, at
Yeah,
least. It was like
yeah,
he gave up so quickly.
yeah.
Right. It's like if you can't move the mouse to it and select it, then we can't automate it. It's like, okay, that wasn't what I expected. Um, I'd say from trying to automate things over the years.
Right.
Both you and me have tried to automate a lot of things, and a lot of windows and a lot of different controls and a lot of different interfaces.
Yep.
Just stopping as soon as you can select it with the mouse seems like, wow.
Not to mention the enormous bill that this company gives you, right? Like that you're paying for the services, right? For them to just, I mean, because of course they only get paid if they actually get a new thing to automate, I got to think, right? So they should be doing everything they can to find a solution. But anyway, yeah, that's quite comical.
As you said yourself, it's like, it's weird that he wasn't willing to use, let's say, 15 minutes on trying a few different methods, just thinking, okay, this is easy. We'll move the mouse a bit, do some key clicks, and
right.
Then that's automated. Let's grab that low-hanging fruit there and be on with it and get some pay for that. But yeah, I had expected him to at least feel the interface, try and poke at it just a little bit, right? Just the smallest things could have probably have cracked open something. I'm like, okay, so I couldn't just double click it with my mouse, but with all the other tools that we know we normally have available, if anything like that was available on the server where the interface was actually located,
right,
then the problem could probably have been alleviated. Right? It's like, is that what what it amounts to be able to automate it with this big automation tool, with these people being paid whatever amount of consulting fees, them just being like, if I can't select it with the mouse, it can't be automated.
Yeah.
I
remember when I was working in market research at Texas Instruments, and we work in cubicles, and I overheard my colleague on the phone because he talks so loud. Anyway, but I hear him, and someone called him, and clearly I could, all I hear is like, oh, yeah, well, we could do like this time of thing. Yeah, we can hire a company for about $30,000, and we can do this study, blah blah. And I'm like, normally I don't like to eavesdrop into stuff, but I went to my boss. I'm like, just FYI, I just heard this guy say this. I'm like, there's a dozen things he could have said. That is the gold standard. That would be the best way. But there are so many other approaches we could offer, to help them with. And anyway, it was funny. It reminds me that of overall, it's like people get caught up in there's one way, right? Or there's just one thing, and they don't think outside the box, or they're just not used to it, or I don't know or they just don't know, I guess, right? But and this podcast is a great example too. Not that we're going to dive into it, but I get a lot of people, they'll comment on a video or something and say, hey, I want to automate Excel, and I'm trying to send, mouse clicks, and I'm like, okay, and they want to take it from Excel and put it into another program, right? It's usually not even just one program, but they'll start off with Excel, and I'll say like, well, first off, I personally wouldn't be sending mouse clicks in Excel, like I'd use COM, and then depending on what you're doing over here, they're trying to use like automate my task or pixel search or something. I'm like, there's far better ways. Like, well, which one? I'm like, I can't tell you that because you didn't tell me what program you're using, and I don't have it, even if you did tell me. So it's like, you have to work through this, I'm working on a list of, I think I have 17 or 18 different approaches. And then we're going to rank order them on several factors like speed, reliability, works on one computer reliably, works on multiple computers reliably, lots of different aspects. And then there's the like learning time, how hard it is to program in, because like DLL calls can do a lot of stuff, but it's a steep learning curve for some people, right? So there's so many things that you really have to take into account, but it'd be very curious, like people at these larger companies, because we know from talking to Tank as well, right? Like they do have some advanced ways for doing some of the things, but then you're still, if the person designing your automation isn't aware of them or doesn't even like them, right? It'd be like you or me too. We could be trying to help someone and find out that like it doesn't have a comm interface and be like, well, then we can't automate it. No, that's we're gonna have to. Well, maybe we can try controls. Oh, well, that won't work. Maybe the UI automation thing, or the ACC library, maybe that'll work. Maybe this or that, and then what, we can automate it sending keystrokes. It's not going to be as reliable, but it'll still probably work. I had a doctor the other day. He wants some help, so Isaiah and I were on the call, and he had actually automated. He's using AutoHotkey. He developed it all himself, and he was like, I'm trying to get to this list view in the program, but there was no way he couldn't figure out how to programmatically access it. So he realized if he hit a certain button, it jumped to the thing before it, and then he'd hit tab, and that was his reliable way to get to it, right? And he was a little embarrassed, but we're like, it works, like, yeah, we'll have a better approach, but it worked reliably, like 90% of the time. And he said it was good. You know what? That's okay.
Yeah, I'm kind of like the same, and with the exact example I had is, it's like just because you can't click it or move the cursor to it or select it with the mouse or whatever it might be, it just felt like too quick of a give up, because as you said, he couldn't get to the thing. But he figured out that if you put it in the one after it, and then press tab, he could.
Right.
So he actually tried to solve the issue.
Right.
He didn't just say, "Oh, I can't immediately," right?
Yeah.
And like too many times I've been sitting there and like, "Oh, this isn't a normal control. Oh my God, need to find the list of what to try to figure out what might work." And okay, a few times you actually end up with stuff that you can't easily get to programmatically. Then if you were even more advanced than me or whoever we know, you could probably get it from memory. Because if the program is able to display it, you could fetch it if you knew where it was. And in some cases, it has some fixed pointers in whatever. I've not done enough with that. Or true enough, OCR hasn't been as reliable as we'd hoped always, but it's getting better.
Yep.
Right. At some point, people, my kids or whatever, they wouldn't even understand that you couldn't just grab whichever text you liked, right? It's like, to me, one of the ones I love is Google Translate on my phone, because I'm able to point the running camera at text live, and it will translate it on that image. So it can actually be viewing live translation of the real world. And as technology like that becomes better, it falls into some of the other talks we've had about AI and stuff like that. But yeah,
I was gonna say Star Trek, right? I mean, you really feel like you're in the future. Like suddenly, you're gonna go meet aliens and hold something up, and it's gonna perfectly translate for you what you're saying, right? It's crazy stuff.
Or Babelfish or whatever. You'll just be able to understand what they're saying because of a small implant we've got at one point, right? It's it's almost impossible to know where stuff like that will end. But yeah, to me, it's like really dropping the bar that quickly on an issue is like, why did we even reach out to you in this
Right.
case, right? Because I then researched the issue afterwards, after that meeting had ended, and it turned out that the program, which looked kind of old school, was actually displaying all of its stuff in a Triton interface, so
Oh,
an IE
right.
web page.
Yeah. Yeah.
So sure enough, you could actually get to it.
Yeah.
Apparently, the program just overlaid an unclickable HTML element on top of everything if you didn't have the needed privileges to actually interact with it. And I didn't. And I was the one showing it. And therefore, I couldn't actually get to clicking in the interface because there's a security feature. So, like, had he just poked at it just a little bit, he would have been able to figure all of this out.
You know, that's a really good point as well. And I'm going to need to add stuff like that because sometimes it's just a matter of your even on your own computer running thing as an admin type of thing. Suddenly, oh, hey, I can get this stuff, right? I didn't think I could. And suddenly if you run your detector tool that you're doing, whatever, you can see it. And it's like, holy cow, I would have missed that if I hadn't just thought of, let me launch this. You were helping me with, what was it? It wasn't that long ago. And we were doing something on my computer. Oh, it was the whole podcast, I think, where we were drilling down and then we moved it from the directory. But anyway, it was at one point we're like, well, let's launch it as an administrator. And then for a minute there it worked, but I forget what it was, but that wasn't really the main thing, right? But it was one of those little things of like, well, wait a minute, this will work. Okay, all right. But yeah, that understanding, because what I was going to say was, depending on the scale of how important this is to get automated, right? There's maybe it doesn't have to be fully automated, right? Maybe you have a human start it off and then the automation, happens after that. B, maybe you can actually install something on that computer that will allow, that will run locally and that takes care of, the issue as well, possibly, right? It just depends. You got to do some digging. Remember that thing that you did years ago where someone asked you, was the text in the PDFs or something, they wanted to get the stuff out of it, and you're like, yeah, we could do this stuff, and then you happen to ask a person and later found out that it all started off electronically in the first place, right? And it's those little things of like, don't give up. Like at this, first, ask other questions too. Fine, there's there. Maybe there's no need for what you're doing. Maybe there's a better approach.
Yeah, exactly. And that is one of the best ones that I can come up with, is that when actually poking at the issue a bit, interviewing people in the process and stuff like that, finding out that the issue with getting stuff out of what I'd call an image, even though it was a PDF, right? It was made into an image in the end.
Right.
And showing the guy an easy to use OCR tool so he could copy out these long numbers. And just finding out that, 3 steps before he actually got it, it had been an electronic version of the same thing. So he could have just selected it. But apparently in one of the steps, someone converted it into an unchangeable file, right? And apparently it was an unneeded step. It's just someone who had learned to do it that way and had just kept doing it.
Yeah, which I was going to say which so often it is, right? That people, not, and I don't mean to insult anybody, but just often they don't know what they're doing, or they have different needs, and so they just do it a certain way. Like it's fine for that. They don't realize later, someone's going to want it a different way, and yeah.
To me, I know we've talked about that before as well, but with the Office pack, with all the different programs, OneNote, Word, Excel, whatever, I don't remember when I kind of noticed it, but it might have been 10 years ago or whatever, when people seem to have quite a good understanding of how to use all the small things that Word could do.
Mm-hmm.
But recently,
Mm-hmm.
and in the last few jobs I've had, which is still working in front of a computer with Word, with Excel and stuff like that, it seems as if those people with that specific skill set has become
Yeah.
fewer and fewer. Like they might have forgotten them because they don't use them, and they're in focus on knowing all of those small aspects, like we talked about with VBA and stuff. But yeah, it's kind of weird.
Yeah. Case in point, I have people that will reach out to me because they're trying to do something usually in Excel, and they're like, we need Joe because he can figure. And I'm like, I'm not an Excel expert, right, by any means. I consider myself that like I haven't really used it in 10 years, right, where I'm actually in it and really learning in it. And yet I always solve it for them, right? It's just like it's just because one is I kind of understand how options are usually available and think of a way to do it, but it is a little scary to me because I'm like, how could you guys use this every day, and yet they still just don't understand some of the basic stuff and concepts.
Yeah, yeah, and I don't know. Sometimes maybe if I don't know if the analogy makes sense, but asking people to do something in the engine room of a car, go and check if the spark plugs are put in, whatever it might be.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if that's the same level of distance that people have when you tell them to do something on a computer. If that's why people don't just click buttons, or they don't switch to that other tab and look in the menu for the stuff. And if one of them has a small arrow, why don't click it and see it unfold, right? It's like
Right.
it's it's not dangerous to click stuff most of the time. Don't don't delete some. Don't click on delete or whatever.
Yeah.
Right? It's pretty straightforward, and don't just panically click on dialogues that come up, because it's like if you clicked on that delete, it will most likely ask you if you truly want to delete. And if you're just panicking and clicking it, then you will end up deleting something. Right? Don't do that. But if you just take your time and look at the pixels on the screen, there's a really good chance that you can actually solve this yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, and part of it, and I did it the other day, right? When I was trying to do something with a plugin you and I both use, and I'm like, hey, by the way, does this have this feature? And I'm like, why don't I just Google it? And in 2 seconds, I found the answer, and I'm like, it's easy to get hooked on when you have someone who knows what they're doing and they're easy to reach to just ask them. Right. And it's like, it's still, I should have at least Googled it first just to see, hey, does it come up? Okay. I don't see it right away. Maybe Jackie's played with it. Right. But,
yeah, I get it. And I often have that happen, but, I'm not like, let me Google that for you. Right. It's not where I'm at, because I actually do want that social interaction.
Yeah.
That is people talking to each other. But yeah, I often get it, right? It's like someone would ask me, where do I find the color formatting button? It's like, I'm pretty sure it's on this third tab in the middle. Of course, I can't remember that if I didn't just do it, right?
yeah.
And if it's something a little bit more obscure, I'll maybe go over to the person, take a quick look. Oh, I didn't find it. Let's do a search. And lo and behold, someone has explained exactly where it is. There might even be a small image with an arrow on it or whatever, right? It's not that far away in most cases. I had an hour ago or two, I was looking for something. I know I'd found it last year, and I got frustrated because none of my searches brought up the exact thing that I knew I had used last year. And that was the thing. I needed that. It was a piece of Danish statistics. So I knew it. I had all of the right search terms, and it didn't come up. And I was like, oh, that irritated me really, really badly. But normally, you doing a few searches and you're there.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, with the easy digital downloads, right? And I mentioned this to you. I know it wasn't the podcast, so it'll be this one, but I'm like, I need to make a video, because when you look for like squeeze page, right, with easy, there's nothing comes up, and yet that thing that we just worked through, like, that's what it is. Yet no one calls it that in easy digital downloads. They talk about a couple other things, like, but this is exactly what it is, right? It's a simple, require an email address to get the file, and they did it. I'm so happy with that result now. It's actually even better than what I was expecting to have, and yet it's part of the tools that we use. Yet again, whoever built it in their tool stuff, they haven't put those keywords anywhere, and no one has done a video on it, right? And so I'm like, okay, I might just make one, just because it pissed me off so much that when I was searching for it, like, there was nothing, and I'm like, they have like, what, 150 extensions to easy. That was the problem. There's so many. And I was just reading through every one. I'm like, maybe there's something in here. And I kept reading and reading. And I found the one we had talked about. Then I found an even better one. And I'm like, wow, this is brilliant. Anyway.
Yeah, that's great.
Cool. Well, so for everyone, the lesson is, one, don't give up right away when you're trying to automate something, right? I wish, and I'm working on something, at some point, I'm not working on this yet, but what I'd like to make is a tool that you can, kind of like the IWB2 Learn tool, where you could drag, something onto whatever you're trying to connect to automate, and have it, instead of actually saying, here's how you connect to it in the sense of it's the ID, or it's, the control, the class NN or whatever. What it will do is say, hey, out of these 10 or 15 different possible approaches, hey, you can connect to the same with controls, or it has a COM interface, or it has I'm trying to think of other ones that you would use, right? But the very last thing, they're going to be rank ordered, right? Of like, the very last one is the sending of a mouse click or finding an image. But because it does take experience in order to even to know the different things first that you even can approach, and then you have to learn how to use those tools to be able to figure out if you actually can use that approach to connect to it, right? Yeah. So that's where I haven't seen anything that says, here's a tool that will help you understand, that goes across 10, at least, let's say even 5, right? These 5 different ways. And even if it just had a checkbox out of these 5, here are the ones you could possibly use, right? And that way it helps people that don't do this a lot to have an idea of where to start.
Yeah. It sounds like something that could be a great help.
Yeah. Cool.
It's probably pretty complex, but sure.
That's unfortunately right. Yeah, that's the problem. And that's why normally, I like to say, not only that, but here is the ID and here's how you're going to do it. And I'm like, that's just too complex to build into this, right? I want something that just says, and maybe it's just a cheat sheet to say, for now, start off saying, go get this script, and here's a tool that you can see if that's available, and here's a tool to see if this is available, and here's a tool to see, if this is available. And then later, we actually work on, because I could do that probably in a couple days, right? Of just be like, let me find, not even, I could do it in a couple hours. I just have to have the time. But yeah.
Yeah, I'd say one thing that comes to mind is having those, the WB2 learner tool, the accessibility tool, the maybe a UI tool, a normal
Windows Spy
tool, Windows Spy. Having just let's say those 5 or something like that in one crosshair.
Right.
If you drag crosshair to something, but just run the straight up usual 5, and it will give you 5 boxes.
Right.
I weren't able to get anything. I was.
Exactly.
And I was.
Yeah.
And then you will have your first kind of idea of how to attack.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And that's, I'm saying, like, that would be, I think, for a lot of people, because I feel bad telling people, like, it just depends, and it often, like, it's either a custom program or they can't share their screen or whatever. And I'm like, well, I really can't help you. Like, I don't know what to do. So yes, this would be pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thanks, man. It was a fun call.
Yeah.
We'll talk to you soon.
One.
Bye.
Bye.